Hi guys, it's Ms. Ravel, and I'm going to show you how to find the midpoint today. So the midpoint can be found super easy by using a formula. And the formula for midpoint is as follows. We're going to identify midpoint with a capital M. So midpoint is always going to be an ordered pair. So an ordered pair, so you're going to have an X value and a Y value. That's an X and a Y value. Okay. So midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and then y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So that's the formula you're going to use. And you're finding the midpoint between two endpoints. So you'll have a part of a line, you'll get their two endpoints, and then you're going to use this formula to find the midpoint. So let's get started. All right, example 1. You've got -4, 4, and 5, comma, -1. Those are your 2 points. So I'm going to go ahead and label these points. I'm going to label these points x1, y1, x2, y2. And again, it doesn't matter which one's the x1 and which one's the the x2. They can just make sure you're consistent. So let's do our formula. And again, our formula, I'll put it up here on the side for you. Our formula is midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So let's go ahead and plug those in. So let's find our x value first. Our x is -4 plus 5 divided by 2, which is going to equal 1/2. Okay, so 1/2 is our x value, which is a completely appropriate answer. Remember, these are going to be on a graph, or you're thinking about you're finding 2 points on a graph. So this is the middle of that, and 1/2 is a completely appropriate answer for your x value. Let's look at your y value. So for our y, we've got 4 plus a -1 divided by 2. And that's going to give us 3/2. So for our first answer, you want to write your answers as an ordered pair. Our midpoint is equal to 1/2, comma, 3/2. And you can go ahead and leave that as an improper fraction. If you wrote it as 1.5, that's fine as well. Just remember that on your exams, they could write it either way. So make sure you are comfortable with switching that into a mixed fraction if you need to, or leave it as improper. Either way is great if you're just turning in work. For the exam though, remember it could look either way. Let's do another example. I'm gonna go ahead and relabel these. It doesn't matter, again, which way you label them. I can name this one x2, y2, x1, y1. It doesn't matter, we're adding. So let's go ahead and plug that into the formula. I am gonna take my 2 x's. For my 2 x's, I've got -1 plus 5 divided by 2, which is going to give me 4 divided by 2, which equals, 4 divided by 2, which equals 2. Let's do the y's. I have +1 minus 5, or plus a -5. That's going to over 2. That gets me -4/2, which equals -2. So this was my x, this was my y. My midpoint is equal to 2, comma, -2. All right, and one more example, just when they give you 2 points and they want you to find the midpoint, I've got my, let me write them here again for you, x1, y1, x2, y2. Switch that back, and I've got my x's. I've got 2 plus a -6, all divided by 2. This is for the x value, which equals -4/2, which equals -2. And then my y value, I've got -1 plus 0/2, which equals -1/2. So my midpoint is equal to -2, -1/2. Right? Let's try a different way. So sometimes you're given a graph and you have to find the midpoint of that line segment. And so I'm going to come here. I'm going to actually blow this up right here so we can do number 1. So this just takes one extra step, and the extra step that this one takes is you actually identifying what the points are. So remember, you always do x first and the y second. So x is the horizontal, y is the vertical. So let's find this point. Let's identify this point. So I'm going to change up the color so you guys can see it better. This point right here, that point is 1, 4. I went over 1 and up 4. Okay, that point right there is 1, 4. Let's identify our second point. We went to the left, that's -3, and we're going down, so that's -2. So this is at -3, -2. And then once you have your points, you guys know how to do this. We just did the examples. You'll be able to go back, label them, x1, y1, x2, y2, and then plug it into the midpoint formula. So let's do that. I have -3 plus 1 divided by 2. Those are my x's right there. That gets me -2/2, which I'm going to reduce to -1. So there's the first one, it's -1. My second value, let's do the y's. I have -2 plus 4 divided by 2. That equals +2/2, which equals +1. So my midpoint is -1, 1. And I can graph that, it's right there. That's the midpoint between the two endpoints. Let's do another example. Let's try let's go with number 3 right here on the corner. Right. Again, identify your points first. So this guy right here is 1, -4. This guy right here is 5, -2. Identify them as x1, y1, x2, y2. So x1, y1, x2, y2. Again, either way is fine, whichever way you label them. And then plug it into your midpoint formula. So remember here, midpoint, okay, is equal to your x's added together divided by 2, and then your y's, add them together and divide by 2. So here we've got 5 plus 1 divided by 2, which is equal to 6/2. Equals 3, so my x value is 3. Let's do the y value. I've got -4 plus a -2 divided by 2. That equals -6/2, which equals -3. So my midpoint is 3, -3. If you have to graph the midpoint, you go over 3 and down -3, over to the right 3. So there's your midpoint right there. It's always better to do the math. Do not rely on just, your eye to look at these things, especially like this one came out as a whole number, but if it comes out as a half or as 3.14 or whatever it comes out with, make sure you do the math. Okay. I'm going to do one more example here and we'll call it a day for midpoint. Your teacher is going to give you more examples in class. Let's just do number 6 right here. So first things first, identify your points. This is at -2, 1. This guy up here is at 5, 4. And then I'm going to label them x1, y1, x2, y2. And I'm going to go ahead and use the formula, just plug them in, adding up the x's, dividing by 2. You guys can do this basic math. So I've got -2 plus 5 divided by 2, which gives me +3/2. Okay, so my x value is 3/2. Okay, if you wrote that as 1.5, that's all right too. Let's find the y's. The y's are going to be 1 plus 4 divided by 2, which equals 5/2. So 3/2, 5/2, that's also 2.5. So kind of look at that on your graph where you have 1.5 and 2.5. So it's going to be about right here. Right about there is where your midpoint's going to be. So you always want to do the math. You don't want to eyeball it. And that'll get you through the midpoint. Super easy. You guys should not have any problem doing this.